When my 7-year-old nephew whispered into the phone, saying he was locked in the basement, I thought it was a prank. But when I heard the fear in his voice and the sound of a door slamming behind him, I realized this was no game. That call forced me to uncover a family betrayal so deep, I had no choice but to call the FBI. My name is Robert Hayes. I'm 63 years old, a retired construction foreman who spent most of his life with a hammer in hand and calluses on my palms. My wife, Linda, passed away 3 years ago, and since then my life had become a rhythm of quiet routines. Coffee at dawn, a slow walk to the neighborhood, evenings spent in the old recliner with the news murmuring in the background. I never thought I'd find myself dragged into a nightmare that felt like something out of a crime novel. Family was always complicated for me. My son, Daniel, and I haven't spoken much since he married Claire. She never liked me, said I was too controlling, too old-fashioned. I kept my distance, even when it meant seeing less of Daniel and their little boy, Ethan. Ethan was the one bright light in that household, a sweet 7-year-old with big brown eyes and a laugh that could crack through any silence. Every time he visited, I felt like I was holding on to a piece of my late wife, like she lived on in him. It was a Wednesday afternoon when my phone rang. Unknown number. Normally, I don't pick those up, but something tugged at me and I answered. Uncle Robert? The voice was small, shaky. My heart stopped. Ethan? Buddy, where are you calling from? There was a pause and a whisper. I'm in the basement. The door's locked. I'm scared. I sat forward, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles went white. What basement? Are you at home? Yes, he whispered again. Daddy said I have to stay here. Claire locked the door. His voice cracked. In the background I heard the faint thud of footsteps, then the heavy slam of a door. I felt cold all over. Ethan, listen to me. Are you safe right now? Can you see anything? Just boxes. It's dark. Please, Uncle Robert, come get me. The call cut off. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the dead screen, my mind reeling. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe he was playing a game. But deep down, I knew Ethan's voice. That was real fear, the kind you can't fake at 7 years old. I called Daniel's number immediately, straight to voicemail. Claire's phone? Same thing. My pulse hammered in my ears as I paced the living room. Something was wrong, horribly wrong. Within the hour, I was in my truck, driving faster than I should have been toward their house on the other side of town. The entire way, I tried to reason with myself. Maybe Ethan had gotten himself locked in accidentally. Maybe Daniel was at work. Claire had stepped out, and this was all some fluke. But the closer I got, the less I believed that story. When I pulled into their driveway, the house looked quiet. Too quiet. Curtains drawn, no car out front. I knocked hard on the front door. No answer. I pounded again, louder this time. Nothing. I circled the house, trying every window, every side door. Then, as I passed by the small basement window, I froze. A little handprint smudged against the glass. My stomach dropped. Ethan! I hissed through the pain. It's Uncle Robert. Silence. Then the faintest whisper from the other side. Help me. My whole body tensed. This wasn't just neglect. This was deliberate. I wanted to break the window right then and there, but something stopped me. Something about the way Ethan had whispered, how careful he was. Whoever locked him down there might still be inside. If I made a scene, I could make things worse for him. So instead, I forced myself back to the truck, hands shaking on the steering wheel. I had built houses my whole life, repaired broken foundations, patched every kind of wall, but I had never felt more helpless standing outside my own son's home, knowing my grandson was trapped inside. And as much as it tore me apart, I knew this was bigger than me. This wasn't just a family matter anymore. It was something darker, something I couldn't fight alone. That was the moment I decided. I was going to call the FBI. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan's hand pressed against that basement window. The image haunted me, clawing at my chest like guilt I couldn't shake. I wanted to storm into the house, smash through the door, and pull him out with my own 2 hands. But the part of me that had lived long enough to know better kept whispering, Think, Robert. Don't rush. If you act blindly, you'll lose him forever. So instead, I called. Again and again. Daniel finally picked up the next morning, his voice groggy, almost annoyed. Dad, why are you blowing up my phone? I gripped the receiver, so tight it hurt. Where's Ethan? He paused just a fraction too long. At school, of course. Why? That's a lie. I snapped. I was at your house yesterday. He called me from the basement, Daniel. I saw his handprint on the window. There was a shuffle on the other end of the line. Then his voice dropped lower. Dad, you don't know what you're talking about. Don't get involved in things you don't understand. Before I could answer, the line went dead. My stomach churned. My son, my own blood, was hiding something from me. And worse, he sounded more afraid of me digging than of whatever was happening to Ethan. The hours dragged on, each heavier than the last. I drove past the school to check if Ethan was there. No sign of him. The teacher, a tired-looking woman at the front desk, told me he hadn't shown up in 3 days. 3 days. By the time I pulled back into my driveway, I felt the walls closing in. My thoughts went places I didn't want them to. Abuse, neglect, or something even darker. But how could I accept that my own son, my Daniel, was part of it? That evening, there was a knock at my door. Claire stood there, arms crossed, wearing that permanent look of superiority she carried like a crown. Her lips curled into something between a smile and a sneer. Robert, she said coolly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. We need to talk. I didn't move, just folded my arms across my chest. Where's Ethan? Her smile widened, sharp as broken glass. He's fine. Better than fine. You worry too much. You always have. But you need to stop interfering in our family matters. I stared at her. Locking a child in a basement isn't a family matter. It's criminal. For a split second, her expression faltered, but she recovered quickly, tilting her head as if I were some clueless old fool. You don't understand discipline, Robert. You coddled Daniel, and look how he turned out. Weak, soft, easily swayed. Ethan won't grow up like that. We're teaching him obedience. My blood boiled. By locking him up? Her eyes narrowed. Sometimes a parent has to do what's necessary. Don't pretend you know better. You couldn't even keep your wife around. The jab hit hard, but I didn't let her see me flinch. Instead, I stepped closer, my voice steady cold. If you ever bring my wife into this again, you'll regret it. Now answer me plainly. What are you planning with Ethan? She laughed softly, shaking her head. You think you can scare me? Daniel, and I know what's best for our son. And you? You're just an old man living in the past. Stay out of it, Robert, or you'll lose the little you have left. With that, she turned on her heel and left, slamming the door behind her. I stood there in the silence that followed, my fists trembling at my sides. I wanted to chase her down, drag the truth out of her, but I forced myself to breathe, to think. Claire wasn't just cruel, she was confident. Too confident, as if she believed no one could touch her. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a case of bad parenting or a toxic household. There was something bigger going on, something calculated. And if I was going to save Ethan, I couldn't just be his uncle anymore. I had to become his protector, his shield. But first, I needed proof, something the authorities couldn't ignore, something that would rip to the lies Daniel and Claire were weaving. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a pot of black coffee in a silence, so heavy it felt like the air itself was pressing down on me. My hands trembled as I replayed every word Claire had said the night before. Her smugness wasn't just cruelty, it was confidence. She wasn't afraid of me because she thought she held all the cards. And Daniel, my son, the boy I once taught to ride a bike, the boy who used to run into my arms after Little League games, he had become her shadow. That was when the bitter truth sank in. If I didn't act, Ethan would grow up in chains, not just locked in a basement, but imprisoned in a life where love was twisted into control. I pulled out the old photo albums Linda had kept. There was Ethan at his 5th birthday, frosting smeared across his cheeks, Daniel smiling behind him. Those smiles felt like they belonged to strangers. What had happened to my son? Was it Claire who poisoned him, or was a weakness already in him and she just fed it? My chest ached with the question, but the answer no longer mattered. Ethan needed me. I went back to the basement window that afternoon. The house was quiet again. No cars out front. I crouched low, peering through the dusty glass. This time, I saw him, Ethan, curled on a blanket in the corner, his small frame hunched, eyes wide when he noticed me. I tapped lightly on the glass. "Buddy, it's Uncle Robert," I whispered. "I'm going to get you out of there." He shuffled closer, placing his tiny hand on the pane. His lips moved, but the glass muffled his words. I leaned in, straining to hear. "Please," he mouthed. It broke me. Right there, I knew this wasn't misunderstanding or a parenting choice or a temporary punishment. This was abuse. Maybe worse. And I couldn't rely on Daniel anymore. He was too far gone. I drove straight to my oldest friend, Jack Reynolds, a retired police detective who now spent his days fishing and fixing engines in his garage. Jack had been at my side through more than a few dark times, and if there was anyone who could guide me through this, it was him. When I told him what I'd seen, his face hardened. "Robert, this isn't just ugly, it's dangerous. If Claire's locking that boy in the basement, there's more to this story. Could be drugs, could be money, could be something we don't even want to imagine. You need to go higher than the local police." I frowned. "You mean?" He nodded. "The FBI. If there's trafficking, abuse, or anything interstate, they'll have jurisdiction. But you need proof. You can't just say, 'My grandson called me.' Courts and agencies need evidence." His words settled into my bones. Evidence. That's what I had to get. I couldn't just be the desperate old man making wild accusations. I had to be the one who outsmarted them at their own game. That night, as I sat in my truck outside Daniel's house with the engine off and the streetlights buzzing overhead, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't powerless anymore. I wasn't just waiting for them to do the next cruel thing. For the first time since Ethan's call, I felt purpose flooding back into my veins. If Daniel and Claire thought they could erase me, if they thought they could hide Ethan in the dark and keep me out, they didn't know who they were dealing with. I'd built houses from the ground up, carried beams twice my weight, and fought through winters when every joint in my body screamed. I wasn't afraid of hard work. And now, the work in front of me was the most important I'd ever face: saving Ethan. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, watching their house, the faint glow of a lamp flickering through the drawn curtains. They thought the night protected them. They thought secrecy was their shield. But I was done being blind, done being pushed aside. It was time for me to fight back, not with fists, but with strategy, patience, and proof. I spent the next few days living like a man with two lives. To my neighbors, I was the same Robert Hayes, watering the lawn in the mornings, waving as they walked their dogs, tinkering in the garage. But inside, every thought, every ounce of energy was devoted to one mission: saving Ethan. Jack was right. I needed evidence. But getting it wouldn't be easy. Claire was sharp, always calculating, and Daniel, though weak, followed her lead. They'd never confessed to me, not openly. I needed to see, to hear, to record. So I started with what I knew: the basement. One evening, I parked a block away from their house and walked under the cover of night. The air was heavy, crickets buzzing the tall grass, and my heart hammered against my ribs like it hadn't in years. I crouched low by the basement window, the same one where Ethan had pressed his hand before. I carried a small recording device Jack had given me, simple, with a long battery life. I placed it carefully under the window ledge, hidden behind a loose brick. My plan was to leave it there for days, maybe weeks, to capture whatever sounds escaped that basement. A child crying, doors slamming, voices raised, anything that proved Ethan wasn't free. The next step was trickier, getting close enough to Claire without making her suspicious. So I swallowed my pride and showed up at their house one afternoon with a bag of groceries. Claire opened the door, arms folded, eyes narrowed. "What do you want, Robert?" I forced a smile. Thought I'd bring some food. Figured you two might need a hand. Her lips twitched, almost in amusement. "Playing nice now, are we?" I didn't answer. Instead, I walked past her into the kitchen. She didn't stop me, which told me something. She wasn't worried. That arrogance of hers was a weapon and an opportunity. As I set the bags down, I glanced around. The kitchen looked staged, spotless, almost sterile. No sign of Ethan. No toys. No drawings on the fridge. Just Claire's designer touch everywhere. Where's the little man? I asked, keeping my tone casual. Claire's smile thinned. At a friend's house. Sleepover. It was a lie. I knew it. And her eyes flickered, just for a second, toward the basement door at the end of the hall. That was all I needed to confirm my suspicions. I stayed long enough to avoid raising alarm, then left. The second I was back in my truck, I jotted down every detail. The way she hesitated, the glance at the basement door, the lie about the sleepover. All of it would help build the case. Later that night, I met Jack again. We sat in his garage, the smell of motor oil thick in the air. You're playing this smart, he said, listening as I laid out my plan. But you'll need more than sound. Photos, video, something undeniable. I know, I said, but I can't just barge in. He leaned forward, voice low, then bait them, pushed just enough to make them slip. People like Claire, they think they're invincible. But under pressure, they show their cracks. That stuck with me. If I could provoke Claire into revealing her cruelty, maybe even catch it on record, I have more than just whispers in the dark. The next day, I drove to a small electronics shop across town and bought a hidden camera disguised as a phone charger. When I visited again, I offered to help fix the Wi-Fi in their living room, pretending to fiddle with the router while plugging the charger camera into the wall. Claire barely noticed. She was too busy bragging about some real estate deal she was chasing, her words dripping with the kind of greed that made my skin crawl. By the time I left, the camera was running, and I prayed it would capture something, anything, to show the world what was happening inside that house. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't shake the weight pressing down on me. I wasn't just plotting against Claire. I was plotting against my own son, the boy I raised, the man I thought I'd taught better. But every time guilt tried to pull me under, I remembered Ethan's whisper. Help me. That whisper was louder than my doubts. 3 days later, I parked my truck in Jack's driveway with my stomach tied in knots. In the passenger seat sat the hidden camera I'd retrieved that morning from Daniel and Claire's house. My hands shook as I set it on Jack's workbench. All right, he said, his voice steady. Let's see what you've got. We plugged it into his laptop. For a while, it was just silence. Hours of Claire pacing the living room, Daniel scrolling through his phone, the hum of the television. My hopes started to wither. Then, 2 hours into recording, Claire's voice cut sharp through the speakers. Get back downstairs, she snapped. I leaned forward, every muscle tense. A child's voice followed, trembling. Please, Mom, I don't want to. Downstairs. Now. A loud thud echoed, then muffled crying. I felt my throat tighten, rage flooding me so fast my vision blurred. That was all I needed to know. Ethan was being locked away like a prisoner. Jack paused the video, his jaw clenched. This is enough to get someone's attention, but we can go further. I nodded, fists clenched on my knees. I'm not stopping now. The following evening, I put the next phase of my plan into motion. I showed up at Daniel's house unannounced, carrying a small box under my arm. Dad, Daniel muttered when he opened the door. He looked tired, thinner than I remembered, like his skin didn't quite fit him anymore. What are you doing here? Thought I'd drop this off, I said, holding up the box. Some old family photos. Figured Ethan might like them. His eyes darted toward the hallway, then back to me. Now's not a good time. I pushed past him before he could stop me. Claire appeared in the living room, her eyes narrowing. Robert. Again. I forced a smile, setting the box on the coffee table. Just wanted to share some memories. No harm in that, right? Her lips curled. You never know when to quit, do you? As they bickered. I kept my eyes moving, scanning for openings. The basement door stood closed, a heavy lock bolted into the frame. It hadn't been there before. My stomach twisted. Where's Ethan? I asked flatly. Claire's smile was razor sharp. At a friend's, you really should learn to trust us. I swallowed my anger. Of course. I left soon after, but not before slipping another recorder behind the bookshelf near the basement door. Claire had grown confident, too confident, and I was going to use that arrogance against her. Back at home, I called the FBI tip line. I didn't give them every detail yet. I couldn't risk them brushing me off. Instead, I told them I had evidence of a child being unlawfully confined, and that I was gathering more to hand over. The agent's voice on the other end was calm, clipped, professional. Sir, if you believe a child is in immediate danger, you need to call local authorities. I will, I said, my voice steady. But trust me, you'll want this case. The next morning, I returned to Jack's garage with the second recorder. We listened in silence. Claire's voice came through first. Daniel, if your father keeps snooping, he'll ruin everything. Daniel's reply was weak, strained. Maybe we should stop. Maybe, Ethan. Don't you dare, she cut him off. Do you want to lose everything we've worked for? He does what we say when we say it. That boy belongs to us, not to Robert, not to anyone else. My heart sank and burned all at once. She didn't see Ethan as her child. She saw him as property. Jack hit pause. There it is. Proof of intent. Combine this with the video, and you've got a case. I sat back, staring at the wall. My own son's voice echoed in my head, hesitant, weak, but complicit. I wanted to shake him, to scream at him, to remind him of the boy he used to be, but I knew it was too late for that. From now on, I wasn't just a father trying to save his son from a bad marriage. I was a grandfather fighting to save a child from monsters, and one of those monsters carried my blood. I reached across the workbench, picked up the USB drive where we'd saved the recordings, and slipped it into my pocket. Next stop, I said, my voice steady, is the FBI office downtown. The FBI didn't move as quickly as I wanted. They needed time to verify the recordings, cross-check school attendance records, and make sure they weren't walking into a false claim. I understood the process, but patience was the hardest thing I'd ever force on myself. Every day Ethan spent in that basement felt like another weight crushing my chest. But then it happened. Just before dawn, 2 black SUVs pulled quietly into Daniel's driveway. I was already parked a block away, watching. When the agent stepped out, jackets marked with those 3 bold letters, FBI. My heart pounded with both relief and dread. I stayed back at first, not want to spook Daniel or Claire into doing something reckless. But when the front door swung open and Claire appeared in her robe, her mouth falling open as the agents pushed past her, I knew this was a moment. I had to be there. I walked up the driveway, my legs heavy, my hands trembling. Dad! Daniel's voice cracked as he appeared behind Claire. His eyes darted from the agents to me, wide with shock and betrayal. What did you do? What I had to, I said, my voice low but firm. To save Ethan. Claire's composure shattered in an instant. She lunged forward, pointing a finger at me. You meddling old fool. You think you can tear this family apart? You've ruined everything. Everything. My voice rose, years of grief and rage finally breaking free. You locked a 7-year-old boy in a basement. You starve him of sunlight, of love. That's not family. That's cruelty. Daniel stepped between us, his hands shaking. Dad, you don't understand. I cut him off. I understand enough. I heard the recordings. I saw the bruises under his sleeves. Don't tell me this is discipline. Don't tell me this is love. This is you choosing her over your own son. Daniel's face went pale. He opened his mouth, but no words came. For the first time in years, I saw the boy he used to be flickering his eyes. The boy who once begged me to build him a treehouse, who used to climb into my lap after a nightmare. And yet he said nothing. He just lowered his head, too weak to defy her. Claire, though, wasn't silent. She sneered, her voice rising in desperation. You'll regret this, Robert. You think the FBI scares me? You think you can take him from us? He's ours. Ours! One of the agents moved to restrain her, but she kept thrashing, her words venomous. You couldn't keep your wife. You couldn't keep your son. And now you want to steal what's mine? Her words stabbed deep, but I didn't flinch this time. I had spent too many nights letting her poison get under my skin. Not anymore. I stepped closer, my eyes locked on hers. Ethan was never yours to own. He's a child, my grandson, and I'll burn every bridge in this world if it means protecting him from people like you. The agents descended into the basement. Moments later, one of them emerged, carrying Ethan in his arms. The boy clung to the agent's shoulder, his face pale, his eyes wide and blinking against the daylight. "Grandpa!" His cry shattered me. He reached out with trembling arms. I rushed forward, taking him from the agent, holding him tight against my chest. His little body shook as he buried his face in my neck. "I knew you'd come," he whispered. Tears blurred my vision. "Always, buddy. I'll always come for you." Behind me, chaos erupted. Claire screamed curses as the agents handcuffed her, her threats spilling like acid. Daniel stood frozen, his head bowed, as if the ground had collapsed under him. I turned once, locking eyes with my son. "You had a choice, Daniel, and you chose wrong." He didn't answer. He just looked away. The agents guided me and Ethan outside, past the flashing lights of arriving patrol cars. Neighbors gathered on their porches, murmuring, pointing. For the first time in a long while, I didn't care about whispers. All I cared about was the weight of Ethan in my arms, the steady thump of his heartbeat against my chest. The days after the raid felt like a storm had passed, leaving broken branches and debris in its wake. The house that once held Ethan prisoner now sat empty, its windows boarded by authorities, its walls marked with evidence tags. Claire was in federal custody, charged with child endangerment and unlawful confinement. Daniel was not arrested immediately. He was questioned, released under supervision, but his silence and complicity would follow him like a shadow in court. For me, life shifted overnight. My quiet routines were gone. My recliner, my garden walks, my morning coffee. They all seemed insignificant compared to the boy who now sat at my kitchen table each morning, spooning cereal into his mouth with a cautiousness that broke my heart. Ethan was safe, but he wasn't whole. The basement had left marks no one could see, shadows in his eyes, the way he jumped at sudden noises, the way he clung to me at night like he was afraid I'd disappear too. I stayed patient, giving him space when he needed it, holding him close when he asked. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the walls with gold, he sat beside me on the porch swing. His little voice was barely above a whisper. "Grandpa, why didn't Dad help me?" The question cut deeper than any blade. I took a long breath, steadying myself. Sometimes people get lost, buddy. They forget what's right because they're scared or weak or listening to the wrong voices. But that's not your fault. You hear me? None of this is your fault. He nodded slowly, leaning against my side. "But you came." My throat tightened. "I'll always come." The FBI kept me updated. They told me my recordings had been critical. The video of Claire screaming, the audio of her admitting Ethan was being controlled. All of it had built a case strong enough to hold in court. Claire's trial would be long, and Daniel's role would be scrutinized, but I didn't care about the legal jargon. All I cared about was that Ethan would never set foot in that basement again. Still, there were nights when doubt crept in. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had destroyed my son completely. Could Daniel ever come back from this? Did he even want to? Those questions gnawed at me. But each time I looked at Ethan, I knew the choice had been clear. You don't sacrifice a child for the hope of saving a broken man. Weeks passed. Ethan began to laugh again, small bursts at first, then louder, freer. He played in the yard, chased a neighbor's dog, and even asked if we could build a treehouse like the one Dad used to have. I promised him we would. In that promise, I felt a piece of my old life return. The community, once distant, rallied around us. Neighbors brought meals. Teachers checked in. Even the pastor from the local church stopped by to say, "Robert, you did the right thing. That boy is lucky to have you." I wasn't looking for praise. I only wanted peace. One afternoon, I received a letter in the mail, Daniel's handwriting on the envelope. My hand shook as I opened it. "Dad," it began, "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect you to read this. But I want you to know I'm sorry. I let her control me. I let her control him. I don't know how to fix what I've done, but I know you're doing what I couldn't. Take care of Ethan. He deserves better than me. I read the letter 3 times before setting it down. For the first time, I didn't feel rage when I thought of Daniel. I felt grief. Deep, hollow grief for the son I'd lost long before the FBI ever showed up. That night, I tucked Ethan into bed. He looked at me with tired eyes and asked, "Grandpa, are we safe now?" I brushed the hair from his forehead and kissed it gently. "Yes, buddy, we're safe, and we're never going back to that house." As I turned off the light, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Resolution. I couldn't fix Daniel. I couldn't erase Claire's cruelty. But I had saved Ethan. I had broken the cycle. And in the quiet of my home, with Ethan's soft breathing filling the room, I realized something. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about redemption. 6 months had passed since that morning when the FBI carried Ethan out of the basement. The seasons had changed. Summer's heat gave way to autumn's cool winds, and with them came a new rhythm to our lives. A rhythm not of fear, not of whispers in the dark, but of healing. Ethan was different now, but stronger. The boy who once clung to me at night now walked with his head a little higher, his laugh echoing across the yard as he kicked the ball down the driveway. He still had shadows. He startled at the sound of heavy doors closing, and sometimes he'd wake in the night, crying out. But he no longer cried alone. I was there, always, to hold him, to remind him he was free. Claire's trial had become a spectacle in town. Reporters gathered on courthouse steps, cameras flashing, stories swirling. She sat in court with her chin lifted high, still clinging to the illusion of control. But the recordings, the testimony, the photographs, they spoke louder than her arrogance. The jury didn't take long. Guilty on all counts. She was sentenced to years in federal prison. Daniel's fate was different. He stood apart from Claire, pale and broken, as though the weight of his silence finally crushed him. He pleaded guilty to child neglect, struck a deal that spared him prison but left him stripped of custody. When the judge delivered the verdict, Daniel looked at me across the courtroom. His eyes held something between sorrow and shame. For a brief second, I almost saw the boy I once raised. But then he looked away, and the moment was gone. Afterward, I walked out of that courthouse with Ethan's small hand in mine. We didn't look back. Life wasn't simple. Being 63 and suddenly responsible for raising a child again wasn't easy. There were school lunches to pack, homework to check, nightmares to soothe, and bills that seemed to multiply overnight. My body ached more than it used to, and there were mornings when exhaustion clung to me like a second skin. But there was joy, too. The joy of hearing Ethan's laughter at breakfast. The pride in watching him draw pictures of tree houses and superheroes instead of basements. The warmth of his hug when he whispered, "I love you, Grandpa." Neighbors pitched in, friends stopped by, and Jack, old Jack, became Ethan's fishing buddy, teaching him how to bait a hook and cast a line. Slowly, a new family was forming around us, one built not on blood alone, but on loyalty, love, and trust. One crisp October morning, Ethan and I stood in the backyard where Linda's old flower garden once bloomed. The ground was covered with fallen leaves, gold and red, crunching under our boots. "Grandpa," Ethan said, holding a hammer almost too big for his hands, "are we really going to build the treehouse today?" I smiled, ruffling his hair. "We are, and it's going to be the strongest one in town. Nobody's locking you away again. You're going to climb as high as you want." We spent the whole day working, me sawing wood, Ethan handed me nails, his laughter spilling through the air. By sunset, the frame of the treehouse stood tall, bathed in golden light. For the first time in months, I felt Linda with me again, like she was smiling down on us. That night, as we sat on the porch swing, Ethan leaned against me and whispered, "We're okay now, right?" I looked out at the half-built treehouse, at the stars beginning to prick the sky, and I knew the truth. We weren't just okay. We were building something stronger than before. "Yes, buddy," I said softly, kissing the top of his head. "We're more than okay. We're free." The basement that once held him captive was gone, but the memory of it would never fully fade. Still, it no longer defined him, or me. We had stepped out of the dark together and into a future we could shape with our own hands. And as the night air wrapped around us, I realized that revenge had never been a real ending. It was just the beginning of a second chance for both of us.